call us to order. Thank you, everybody, for being here at our May Policy Committee meeting. And we've got a very full agenda. The first thing I'd like to do is ask for a motion to approve the minutes from April 29th.
So moved.
Second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Minutes are passed. And Dr. Robinson, tell us about the AI work group, please.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. So as technology continues to evolve at an unprecedented pace, generative artificial intelligence has emerged as a powerful tool with significant implications for education. Generative AI refers to systems that can create content such as text, images, audio, or even code based on data they have been trained on. These tools, including platforms like ChatGPT and others, are increasingly accessible to students, educators, and staff, and they are already being used in ways that enhance creativity, productivity, and personalized learning. However, with great potential comes the need for clear guidance. The use of generative AI raises important questions around academic integrity, data privacy, intellectual property, and equity of access. And to that end, it is critical that we proactively establish parameters for how generative AI can and should be used within our district. When Dr. Taylor first came on board, we had a great conversation with regards to how he wanted to see this work done as we create guardrails for what this work would look like. And so today we want to provide a high-level update on the progression of direction of our efforts to craft a forward-thinking generative AI policy that will guide responsible, innovative use of AI in both teaching and operations of the district. And so who is leading this work? So Dr. Crane is tasked to lead this work in collaboration with Adam Gary of Advanced Learning Partnerships and with our own Allison Reed, who is considered an expert in this field with all the work that she's done throughout the nation, and she's the Senior Director in Digital Learning and Libraries. And so just to give you an idea of what the timeline looked like as a result of the work that's been done this far, I will ask Dr. Crane just to provide just a little highlight of the work that's been done on these particular days from December all the way to April 25th.
Sure. Well, I think I'll let Allison she was part of pulling, actually coordinating, facilitating the work for our larger group. We pulled together a group of about 50 folks. I would say A to Z, but we didn't quite get to Z. We did include the PTA, and what we really were aiming for is working with our chiefs to identify folks across the district, including school-level personnel, whether they are school leaders or teachers, teacher leaders. The one group you won't see here, you won't see students on this list. We did 4 full working days, 8:30 to 3:30, and we did not feel it was responsible to pull multiple students out of classes for 4 full days. What we did do, though, is have multiple discussions with the superintendent's student leadership council. I could get you the specific dates if you're interested, but we have talked with them multiple times about artificial intelligence, including reviewing some of our draft policy language, which you'll hear about in just a little bit. So we have not kept students out of the loop on this. They are very much in the loop and very much ahead of many of the rest of us who are sort of entering the learning space on this. Do you want to kind of walk us through the work that we did those 3-4 days together?
Sure. So with this wide group of folks over the course of 4 days, we began with a fundamental understanding of how generative AI works, what the risks and possibilities are in the K-12 space. We have to understand how it works so that we know where we need to focus our energies in terms of learning, policy, all of those sorts of things. And so once we developed a foundational understanding, then we started to, the first thing that we worked on was a set of guiding principles, which you will see fleshed out later in our initial policy language. And upon those guiding principles is what the intention is to build everything else from. Those guiding principles we were able to socialize, as Dr. Crane mentioned, not only with student groups, but also with Superintendent's Teacher Advisory Council, as well as our AAA group from our community, to get some feedback on those guiding principles to make sure that we were headed in the right direction on that foundational step. And so from there, we focused on building resources for different stakeholders within the district, not only instructional stakeholders, but also operational guardrails and resources that they could use. And so that really was the crux of that work. And so we're bringing this first shot at you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was really essential for the group to know what it is and how it works and how it's developing so that we could then begin to explore it and apply it to our work. And then really from there develop. And we started the group out of 50 folks there with some folks who were like, yeah, I've heard about it on the news, but I have never touched it, to other individuals who had multiple paid subscriptions across multiple platforms. So it really was a varied group as far as knowledge base and experience base. We started out with, are we really letting this genie out of the bottle? Societally and even in my own workspace to, I can totally see how this is gonna, those same individuals by the end of the fourth day were already planning for how these tools, and they're tools, they're not replacements, these tools can help benefit their work and the folks that they serve. So it was really a great 32 hours together. And that's a significant, I think the other thing I want you to hear is the folks who were there really did commit a significant chunk of time to the work.
And I think it's important to note that the varied perspectives that you see represented on this list really, I think, contributed to some robust conversations about both risks and possibilities for the use of these technologies in Wayne.
And so as we get ready to prepare for what's coming next, one of the things that I wanted to highlight as well so that the board is aware is that this team really focused on the instructional side and the operational side and what the impacts would be. And so during our policy committee meeting on June 25th, we intend to bring a draft, and that draft would have the board statement, definitions with regards to generative AI, AI literacy. It will talk about the commitments, and it will talk about the guiding principles. So this has been a very great work and informative work, but at this time, we are more than willing to answer any questions you may have with regards to the work that we're doing to bring this draft policy to the policy committee.
I'll just go around this way. Mr. Hershey?
So this work, this policy is just for how students are going to use AI?
Well, when we talked about the policy, it's for students, educators, it's for people on the operational side of the house, employees, staff. It's the engagement from the district perspective of what it's going to look like.
Do we have, I'll just ask a couple
Yeah.
now.
Yep.
Pass it along. Do we have a sense of who is currently using AI in central services, for instance, or how we're using it, who's using it, how we're using it kind of across the school system?
We do, yes.
And how do we get that information?
We have a sense for how they're using it based on that representative sample of folks that have come to work with us, and then what they report back from going back to their respective teams and talking through it. In terms of a data set, we don't quite have that yet. One of the things that we are looking at is starting to look at using an enterprise version of one of these models, which will give us more of that data. And that's an example of a decision that has come from conversations with this group of stakeholders across the district, right? So more to come on that.
So and are we identifying areas, and I'll just say across the school system, where we think it can be used to support central services, improve tutoring? I mean, there's a number of areas. I have real concerns about the ethics and the impact on jobs and the impact on what we're teaching long-term. And I think that's a conversation the school system needs to have. But I'm also can see benefits where we have things falling behind because we're not properly, in my view, we're not properly staffed because of the state, and we're really lean in central services. So are we identifying and bringing before the board areas where there's a number of these areas that's low-hanging fruit where we can use AI to speed stuff up and to support staff?
Sure. First of all, it's a great question, and we are absolutely having those conversations about, again, what are the risks and what are the possibilities? We don't want to be so far behind, but we don't want to be just outsourcing everything to this technology just because we can. And so the way that we're approaching those conversations are really with the subject matter experts driving the direction that we go. So for example, we don't believe that that group of folks, any more than the folks in this room, should be telling a specific department exactly how and when they should be using artificial intelligence, right? If there is, we want to build some capacity so that with their expertise and their subject matter, whether that's facilities or instruction or curriculum, they can drive what makes the most sense, given an understanding of the risks and possibilities. And so those are very much, like Julie said, it was 32 hours over the course of 4 days, and there were lots and lots and lots of those really deep dive conversations about exactly those things. And so there's not an intention that we issue blanket decrees of what should be done, but rather that the experts, the content experts, regardless of what that perspective is, would be driving that work.
I'm going to take this. Ms. Gordon, do you have anything? Not right now? No. Dr. Ng?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any known concerns about security risk? And I don't know whether you mentioned it earlier, but in terms of the use of this technology, in school, and whether there is any kind of way to, I don't know how to say it, but just the data is not only flowing in, but it's also flowing out.
I see what you're saying.
So is there a way that we can somehow cord off that so that it doesn't prevent it from going out as much as it goes coming in?
Yes, that's a great question. I mentioned that we're talking about the use of an enterprise generative AI model. And so right now, our district already has a contract with Google because we know that we have our Google suite of services that we use across the district that we already pay for. As part of their K-12 package, if you will, that we already pay for, so we're not talking about any additional dollars, they include for K-12 districts enterprise versions of these tools. And so if we will make the shift to Google Gemini, then we are on what I would like to refer to as a walled garden. And so one of the benefits of that is not only does it not train on our data, which is kind of what you were mentioning, Dr. Ng, we put things in, but it is protected. They don't train on that data within their systems. And so that's one of the reasons why we're exploring exactly that, because there are inherent risks, right? And so moves like moving to an enterprise model that is a little bit more of a walled garden, it also gives us the ability to archive and do some other technical things that keep us more safe and our data and systems more safe. But those are absolutely conversations that we're having, and part of why we brought that group together in the first place. So that's a great question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Caulfield?
Excuse me. So my question was also in regards to safety, but more, not so much about data, but more of our students, like what they will be doing with it, and also how are we going to ensure that they're using it only as a tool?
Can you say more about your last part of your question?
So you
that I
mentioned that
answer?
we would be using it as a tool, and that's obviously the advantage of having AI and, all this technology. So I guess I'm more concerned about the risk that it is going to take over the human aspect of learning, both for our children and for our teachers.
Yeah, great questions. So first, only students for which terms and conditions allow, so that would be 13 and up, would have access to the use of these tools in our space. So that is one technical way that we can keep guardrails up. But I would say that the second piece is the critical nature of teaching AI literacy and just technical digital literacy in general, so that students understand that. And then as far as how are they using it, again, building digital literacy skills not only for our students, but also for our staff, so that we are intentional when we use it and discussing those risks and possibilities with our staff. It will be part of training. And that's part of sort of the weeds and the details that we've gotten into with resources for all of our essential partners across the district to ensure that questions like that can be answered with resources to back them up.
Okay. And then my second part.
Excuse,
if
let me
I
add
could.
just a little bit to that.
Yeah,
So when we come back on the 25th, there will be specific examples aligned to what it is that you're referring to. We didn't want to bring all of that today. We just wanted to give you a high-level overview. So when we come back on the 25th, we will be able to dive into the nuances, not only of the policy, but some of the examples that are going to be directly aligned to the guardrails that are going to be put in place as a proposal. And so at that particular time, we can really unpack everything. Again, for today, we just wanted to give you an overarching perspective of the work, just to let you know that this work is going on, and we're going to be prepared to bring it back to you for consideration.
Okay, thank you. That was the second part, is what do we expect to see after April? Thank you.
When would you want this policy implemented? So I know you're bringing it to us June 25th, so it would not be for the new school year, maybe a little later than the start of year-round?
I think that's a great question that I'm going to have to touch base with the superintendent.
Okay.
So that I can make sure I'm aligned to his expectations of what that's going to look like moving forward. Even though we have different,
So ultimately, what I want to make sure is that that we have the beginning of a policy and approach about how we deal with AI. And what I will tell the entire board is that we can expect our policy and our position to change over time because AI is so new. But one of the things I talked about coming in is that we need to make sure that we have an official position about where we are based on what we know at this time. But I do expect that to change and change rapidly. But at least this gives us the beginning of what we want that to be. And then we'll make those changes as necessary. We see changes in the landscape, if you will.
Ms. Mahaffey?
Thank you. Ms. Reed, I'm glad you touched on having a digital and AI literacy plan for not only our students but our staff, because, as Dr. Crane said, there's a vast swath of experience when it comes to using this tool. I also want to highlight, we've heard a lot about the issues with AI and the energy that it requires. And we do have a sustainability policy and sustainability plan. So Dr. Taylor, while Mr. Strickland isn't here, I did want to lift that up as he's working on that plan coming forward. I think this is a huge piece of that and making sure we're aware of the implications.
That's all. Mr. Swanson?
Yes, thank you. I don't really have too many comments, just, I think it's important that we meet students where they are. AI is here, and I think if we delay or push back against this, then we are not necessarily setting our students up to be productive members of society. But I also know that there is responsibilities that come along with that. So looking forward to reviewing that policy, and whatever I can do to help, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Haggerty?
Thank you. And I apologize to miss the beginning of the presentation, but I think two concerns that I have. One, I think you've addressed, and Ms. Mahaffey just spoke to this, the difference between the use of AI in, say, district operations and then the use of AI for students and instruction in the classroom. And I think you could put this under one policy, but I think if you do, you would want to bifurcate the policy, and I think you've got two completely different sets of expectations, and I think you want to be clear so that if anyone reading it understands this is what we'd expect from staff and this is what we expect from students. And if that's easier as two related policies in the same family, that might be something to consider. I know we've divided up some policies in terms of conduct between staff and students before, but I do want to make that clear. And then the second thing is bringing something back by the 25th does seem very ambitious for as large an issue as this is. And I wouldn't tell you not to bring it back so that we can have discussion. I just wonder if we'll be in a position that we would need more time beyond that. I know that some individual board members have spent some time looking at this issue, have attended webinars and conferences on this, and it may be that, and we haven't really done this as much before, but if you have a working committee, you may want board representation on the committee, or just some thoughts or feedback. Just something to think about, and if board members around this table have interest in it, I think that could be something that would be valuable, just working on this timetable, a chance to maybe get your concerns or thoughts out, or share some of the information that you have. I know that NCDPI had been working on a model policy. They'd shared that with us at a School Board Association convention, and there was some other material that was shared with us from NCDPI at that conference, looking at what some just independent, think tanks and research groups had done in terms of pros and cons, and, at one point, like all of the benefits to students that they could identify, through use of AI, but then also potential dangers and situations either where students are becoming overly dependent on AI, or even where an irresponsible use of AI had led to some serious wellness issues for some students. So I just want to make sure that we capture all of this into whatever our policy becomes. Thank you.
Thank you. Because of our agenda, I'm going to move us along, but I think you've given us plenty to think about, and so thank you for bringing this preview to us. And I will ask that we move on to Policy 3420, Student Promotion and Accountability. We're ready when you are.
All right. Good afternoon, board members and committee members. Thank you for having me here this evening or afternoon. I have two things that are coming before you for review, for consideration for policy, first read as well. So the first one will be student promotion and accountability. That's 3420. The next one will be a regulation code 3102. So those are the two that I'll be reviewing. Just to indicate that the information in red is going to be from our School Board Association recommendations. Anything that's in blue is our language that is added to those recommendations as well. So I'll go through each one of those, if that's okay.
Yep.
So with 3420, we'll start in Section A. The first thing that you'll see in red is with promotion standards. There now has to be a career development plan in place, and it has to be executed by the end of their 8th grade year and the end of their 10th grade year in order to be promoted to the next grade level, as indicated by the School Board Association. That has been communicated already with schools. Our CT director and her department has been working with CDCs and deans to communicate this and to put processes in place to ensure a smooth transition for this to take place, utilizing our current resource, Nature Clarity, as well. And she's also in the boardroom to answer any questions if we have questions on that topic. The next piece will be under Section D, and that'll be under the individual reading plans. It'll be just the removal of the date indicator at the beginning of that paragraph. So we will just go right into an individual reading plan, just a date removal at this time. The next section will be under Section E, and that'll be credit recovery. And so what the changes here are going to be is that we will be administering a pre-assessment for credit recovery courses, and that will be administered, and then there'll be a credit recovery course tailored to the needs of that student. And any course that has an EOC will be required to still take an EOC even if it's a credit recovery course. So initially, they didn't necessarily have to take an EOC with the credit recovery class, and now they do, and they have to do that within 30 days of completion. And we've added, broken into two sections at the bottom of that Section E, where you have non-elective credit courses required for graduation. This is again for credit recovery. Beginning with the 25-26 school year, any non-elective graduation requirements will require a numerical grade for credit recovery. Previously, we have done pass-fail for that. Pass-fail still is in place for summer school as well. It's at the start of the 25-26 school year that we will have to do a numerical grade, and what we will do is look at the original grade has to be factored in as well. And so another big change is that new grade will replace the previous grade on the transcript for the failed course. And we did have another section, we broke it into two sections for the elective-based requirements, and that is to indicate that we can still do pass-fail for those courses for credit recovery as well. And then the only other changes within this policy are going to be within your reference guide at the very end for your other resources and references.
So this time I'm going to go the opposite direction, but I do want to ask just my own thing that stands out to me. In Section A, can we make that a hyperlink to the general statute 115C-158.10? Can we just hyperlink to that, even if it's down below? And the reason I say that is because in other parts of this policy, we hyperlink to other general statutes. I just think for consistency, we should do it that way. Chair Haverty, I'll start with you.
No questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you saw you. Yes, Mr. Swanson.
Yes, so I had a couple of questions, or statements and questions. Beginning with Section A, you talk about the part in red under Section A, the new promotion standards. I know you mentioned that you're working with deans of students, career development coordinators. How are you also working with parents to inform them as well?
So a lot of communication has been going out from student services and through principals as well for families to anticipate this. We've been working with students for many years about starting career development plans in 8th grade and continuing them in high school. So it's not, the promotion standards are a shift much more than the concept of the career development.
Thank you. Just want to make sure that, we're not leaving any stone untouched, or whatever that saying may be. Yes, unturned. Thank you, Ms. Caulfield. I knew it was a stone with something. But with the credit recovery, I've had a lot of experience teaching high school of developing credit recoveries and making sure that you're not shoving a semester's worth of courses into a small time frame. And so I have seen colleagues that have done that. And so my concern with this is, how do we ensure that you're not overwhelming a student? We know a student has failed a course, and it may be, circumstances that are not related to academics. But my concern is some teachers potentially trying to shove a semester or year-long credit work into a credit recovery that then pushes the student out of the process and not necessarily trying to gain that credit.
So we do have two separate things that can assist with your statement and question there. So we do have also objective recovery. That is real-time recovery for a student while they are currently in the course. So that's objective recovery. Your credit recovery is going to be after the fact. And so that pre-assessment on the units is what's going to help them test out of the units of content they are already proficient and mastery in. And so therefore they will not have to take the full course in order to get the credit recovery. Because if I fail the course with a 50, for example, I may be proficient and or have mastered 50% of that content, and I only need to take the other 50 and recover it. And so that's where the factoring of the original grade comes back into play as well, because the course will be reduced based off of student previous knowledge.
And the reason why I raised that is because I know oftentimes students don't really understand policies, but make sure that was a little bit clear for those students who are trying to advocate for themselves, making sure they understand the difference that you just pointed out. So I don't know if that's an RMP they can go out or something, because I think it's important that we also show students how to advocate for themselves, because as they go to higher education, your parents are not there to push a credit recovery if you go to college or whatnot. But having something here that really fleshes that out clearly for those students would be helpful. That was something I would like to see.
We had over 2,800 students that engaged in credit recovery fall semester. We're still getting more statistics back for the spring semester.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Yes, go ahead.
I was just curious if you could clarify, you said that they'll retake the EOC in 30 days.
I'm sorry, Cheryl, where are you?
Item E,
Okay.
for credit recovery. When they retake that, it gets averaged into the other grade that they, in other words, the first grade that they received that was a failing grade, that gets averaged in with the new grade?
As of right now, that is not averaged into for the credit recovery side. They just do have to retake it, though. It's not averaged in. that is something that we can look into a little bit more with that and accountability.
Okay. Okay, all right, thank you.
So I actually have some confusion about that because I'm not following where you also talked about the previous grade had to be factored in. So help us understand that, or help me understand that a little bit better.
So there has to be a formula that's created, and that's in process right now. So we'll bring that back to you prior to this going out. But there has to be, we've worked with other counties and what they've looked at. We've also looked at with the vendor that we are utilizing for credit recovery, what formula would actually work. And so, for example, if a student failed a class with a 40, we would turn that into a points, for example. So this is just an example of 40 times 0.4 for the 40% that they've already mastered. And then you have to get whatever percentage the course that they're going to take, say, let's say 60%, and then whatever the score they have as a final grade, you average those into points as well to get a final course grade, is the way that they are recommending that we do this. There's a formula that goes with that. It's not here because that's going to be a process piece, but you have to include it into the final grade. Does that make it?
Clear as mud.
Yes.
I'm kidding. No, that is helpful. Yeah.
Is there a state requirement on what the formula is? Or can we create our own formula that if a student does poorly, that limits the impact of that initial grade?
Yes, we can create our formula as long as we are factoring in the original grade.
So the original grade could be like 1% of the...
If the board chooses to do so, yes, sir.
Well, I want to make it, I mean, if we're doing this, I don't want to punish a kid who's doing all this additional work, and then they do a great job on the recovery, and then they get dinged, and it's significantly pulled down because of how they did initially.
Yes, sir. So what we will do is we'll actually bring you multiple options to review as well, and we will also be getting feedback on multiple options for how that grade will be factored in.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, it kind of goes along with the other question, but is there a threshold at which point that instead of doing a credit recovery that you just repeat that course? Or,
So there's not a threshold for that right now. So if a student at any point reaches failure, they can do a credit recovery. The way that our policy is in place now, if it passed, they would do grade replacement if they wanted to retake the full course.
Mr. Swanson?
Just to follow up to Dr. Eaton's comment, but if a student has a B and wants to receive an A, that student would not be eligible for an objective recovery.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah,
That's
that would be grade replacement. That'd be a different part of the policy.
Would you like us to vote to move this to first reading, or do you want to do the 3102 first?
We need to vote for this one because the 3102 is the RMP
Right.
and no action is required.
Right.
So
Okay. All right, so do I have a motion to move 3420 to first reading? So moved. Did you get those? I think it was going to happen. Thank you.
Can I just ask one?
Yeah, of course.
You said that the formula, you're working on it, so it's not yet created. When do we expect that to be ironed out?
Within the next 2 weeks. We have a draft formula now, and we're inputting what, based off the data that we have in our current system, what grades would look like and what they would populate, so we have examples to be able to share. We're also gathering information from our vendor that we currently use at Ingenuity and what some of their other counties are actually doing with this policy as well, in order so we have a better understanding kind of globally what's going across North Carolina.
Okay, and will we have that before we approve this policy at the board table?
Yes, I can bring that to you.
Okay, thank you.
So I was wondering if it would be more appropriate to bring that to student achievement, or do we need it back to move the policy forward?
that formula is not in the policy language. So it seems to me, I'm looking at Drew, whether or not that is appropriate for a student. That was the thought that I was having. That sounds like a student achievement
I
committee
mean,
meeting.
personally, I think absolutely. I mean, in terms of getting grading practices, I think that definitely fits
Yeah.
within the context of student achievement, and that keeps the policy, and then all the guidance and best practices that go behind that aren't necessarily policy level. I think we can kind of
Yeah.
merge and discuss at that table, at the board's wishes.
I agree. I just think it's good to make sure we state that clearly so we're all on the same page and for those listening. So thank you so much. Okay, we did have a motion and a second. So are there any other comments or questions? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Yes. So now the 3102 RMP for online instruction.
Yes, ma'am. Just for informational purposes, if you look under Section H, credit recovery, you will see where we have removed Grad Point. That was an actual vendor we were utilizing for credit recovery. We have changed the language to be a little bit more broad to allow for not a specific vendor to be included into the policy. This will allow us, if anything happens or changes in vendors, to keep the policy as written. And you may note above that in other sections, there are things like NCFE or Power School that are included. Those will be amended as well to reflect any changes.
And again, committee, we don't have to take action on this, but I welcome any comments or questions about the RMP. All right. Can we move on to 7100 recruitment and selection action? Excuse me, that's my comment. So recruitment and selection. Thank you all.
In this section, we have 3 policies and 1 RMP. So if you want to do policies one by one, we can do that. If you want to do them as a batch, we can do that too, either way.
Since they're on, we'll just do them one by one. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so 7100 recruitment and selection of personnel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will start off with the first one, Policy 7100. These are revisions, relatively minor. They really just seek to align the language in the Wake County policy a little more tightly with the School Boards Association policy and really try to clarify the school system of lawfully promoting equal employment opportunities. So just to go over the revisions briefly, the first revision you will see just moves the language in green from the beginning of the 3rd paragraph up to the bottom portion of the 2nd paragraph. We just felt like it flowed better coming directly after that equal employment opportunity language. And then there we revised the end of Section A to align more closely with School Board Association model policy and more clearly describe the school system's objectives of promoting equal employment opportunities. And the language around removing barriers in particular also aligns with Title VI language. So if the policy committee supports these changes, we request moving it to first reading.
And that's it. Just that, those 2 paragraphs really.
Yeah, it's a long policy, but the changes
Yeah.
were in the front there.
Yeah. Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments?
Motion to approve and send to first reading?
Second.
All right. Going in? No? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 7100 goes to first reading. And we will do 7650 next, which is travel and expenses.
Excuse me. As you know, I had a very long weekend.
I wasn't going to say anything, Ms. Posey.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Edmonds, Policy Chair Edmonds, and board members, and Superintendent Dr. Taylor. Policy 7650, employee travel and other expense reimbursements. This policy is created by the School Board Association. Of course, we've made some minor modifications to it. Additional revisions were made by staff When adopted, it will replace two current policies. One is 4501, visitation and conference cost, and 3711/4711, damages reimbursement to employees. The purpose of this policy is to set rules for reimbursing employees for travel and other business-related expenses. Some of the key provisions include pre-approval processes that we have for in-county and out-of-county and country travel, out-of-state travel approvals by the superintendent designee using the designated travel authorization forms, establishing oversight and compliance for the superintendent or designee responsible for monitoring compliance with these procedures. The changes strengthen language on accountability and consequences for misuse or failure to reconcile travel advances, which are listed in here as sort of exceptions. Clarifies excess lodging costs required. We align with the state policies on that, so the Office of State Budget Management sets those restrictions, and we follow those as an agency. And that's kind of the highlights. So you see a lot of the processes are aligned with how we currently operate, and it just sets those rules more clearly for our staff.
Thank you. I'm going to take a point of privilege and have the first question. In Section G, under reimbursement of other business expenses, I was curious about the $250 limit and wondered if that applies to teachers who spend out of their own pockets for things, or is that really meant for more of a district level expense than a classroom expense?
So I think we set a limit there. It is the expectation that we purchase through school system funds. We have means of doing it via credit cards. So we have a supply credit card that's at every school. We also have supply cards in our district central areas. So we do have an expectation that when at all possible, that it is done through the procurement processes that we have established by the board. Via the credit card can be done by direct pay, where vendors provide us, basically they invoice us and we'll pay them via direct pay, or through a purchase order. So there are limits, and we do request that staff follow our procurement processes before there's a situation where someone's going out of pocket. But there may be some situations that cannot be avoided. Sometimes somebody forgets the PIN number for the credit card, and they have to make the purchase out of pocket.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? Chair Haggerty?
I don't know if I got an answer to what Ms. had asked. Is this something, and just in terms of daily practice, that goes on at a school level where a teacher now seeking this reimbursement would need to get approval from a budget manager? Or is this, again, more limited to district
Yes.
staff? Okay.
So board policy has designated staff. So I believe it reads the superintendent's designee. The structure that we have for budget manager approval is a budget manager who is an authorized, a school principal, can be a secondary budget manager, assistant principal, or in the central areas, you have various administrative levels that are managing that budget. So we are required to make sure that there is a budget manager who is over that money approving and authorizing that purchase before it's made.
So for clarity, there's a budget manager at the school level in addition to the admin, who would be the supervisor?
Yes.
Well, the principal is the budget manager in most cases.
Principal or an AP as a secondary, yes.
Okay, so when it requires an employee supervisor and budget manager, it's two distinct people. And if the budget manager is the principal, then they would have to get, at the school level, the principal and some other supervisor?
It could be one or it could be both. So, let's see, so at a school level, it's likely going to be their principal because they are the direct supervisor. But at a central level, there could be a manager who doesn't have budget manager authority that says, yes, I'm okay with you going on that professional development trip. But then a budget manager who is over the money would also have to approve the trip. because the manager's saying it's essential, mission critical to the person's job responsibilities, and I'm authorizing it, but the budget manager has to approve it because they hold the funding authority to do so.
So I'm wondering, would it be appropriate to have it to flesh it out for what it looks like for classroom staff and for district office staff? So therefore, it's clear expectations for those individuals, and folks are not concerned, or, so I mean, if we had questions, I'm pretty sure if I'm reading this, and I'm a classroom teacher, how would I understand, what this process looks like? So if they could just, maybe that's an RMP that we can flesh out, just to provide a little bit more clarity on this.
And also, I have a little bit of a concern because it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily, the way it's worded here, mean cumulative, because some teachers do spend more than $250 for their classrooms. I don't know. I don't have the solution right now, but I'm just wondering if we need to be a little more clear about that.
So one of the things I would ask administration is that, I was talking to Dr. Crane, that the model policy came in and had a $50 recommendation
Right.
in it. So we changed it to $250, and I was asking what was the rationale for that. But I think that's what you're getting at, how high or low would we want to set that, knowing that teachers have reimbursements all the time. So you may want to share some of that, Dr. Crane.
So my question would be, how often are teachers submitting for reimbursement for things that they buy for their own classrooms? My understanding is that's not necessarily like what we do. If a teacher wants to do that, they do that. Otherwise, there's a process in place for how we acquire materials for classrooms. Am I?
It varies. So we do get a lot of reimbursements from staff. And there's only one card at a school, mind you, with how many teachers at a school. So the needs may pop up at different times at the same time. So there are reimbursements out there. But I think they are likely following the process of getting their principal to approve it so that they can ensure they are reimbursed for something that is allowable within the school's budget. So I think we can clarify that to state that it can be the principal because they serve as both supervisor and budget manager.
Ms. Mahaffey?
I don't have anything.
I'm sorry, I thought you did. Ms. Caulfield?
Just to clarify this piece, it seems like we were all a little confused. How much is budgeted for a teacher to have that's initially allotted in their classroom?
Every school has their own independent school budget. So once we allot based on formulas, the school principal, they work out what their plans are going to be for their budget for the year.
So is this amount that we're speaking about in G, is this above the principal's initial allotment? Then they have to ask for reimbursement? Or is it anything?
Yeah, it would be in the school's budget. They receive an amount per student in their allotment. It is above that per student allotment amount. But it is an amount that we raise because we know $50 was a low threshold for reimbursement.
Okay, so they get their dollar amount per student in the classroom, and then this is applying to anything that's above.
At a school. There's a dollar amount per student for the school.
I guess I'm just not clear if, because it sounds like anything that the teachers are doing, if they don't have like a specific amount that we're speaking about, then you would have a lot of applications for things to be reimbursed, unless I'm misunderstanding.
Yeah, so to kind of explain, I know reimbursements take place all the time, and I think Ms. Posey noted that. And so what we're really talking about is that there's some function that's happening at the school, and the teachers are going to go out and purchase whatever material it may be for that program, whatever the issue may be, and then they're going to be reimbursed from that. That's completely different than a teacher who decides I'm going to go out and buy something for instruction in my classroom that I don't seek reimbursement. And so normally a principal is going to have an understanding of when you go out and spend funding, what you can do without having to come to me. Most of the times, if it's something that they have the receipts for, it's certainly acceptable. They're going to reimburse them for that. But this just begins to put a limit on that. And what I understand is that before then, we didn't necessarily have a limit. Is that correct?
We did not have a limit.
Okay. And so, and I wouldn't anticipate it being a huge problem. In most instances, if a teacher has done something that the principal wasn't necessarily good with, then they would more than likely reimburse them and say, don't you do that again unless you have my approval. But, AJ, I'll let you add your portion to it.
Yeah, and I'm aligned in what you said. I think what happens most of the time is schools have a way of fulfilling needs in the classroom. They don't have to go out and buy everything and reimburse everything. So you need pens, or you need sticky notes, or you need tissues or paper. Like, the school is going to have that on hand to be able to give to teachers. In addition to that, they can make requests through like the P-card, direct pay, those kinds of things. But there are cases where, especially sometimes when it's time sensitive, the teacher needs this tomorrow and we don't have time to do a PO, and they just go to the principal and say, hey, I need X. Is it okay if I go buy this, and will you reimburse me? I think that's what we're kind of looking for. And without having some of these approvals in place, I mean, you think of 165 teachers or so at a high school all go out and spend a couple $100s, that can really impact the budget. So I think having the approval process helps that. Having a sort of expectation of an amount, I think the policy does still allow to exceed that 250 if the budget manager sees that there's a need. So, I think there's some things in place where much of the supplies can be handled directly at the school with what's sort of an inventory, but this is for in addition to that. Does that help, Ms. Coffey?
Perfect, thank you, yes.
And I would add, we could remove any dollar amount because truly, as an employee, if I don't have budget manager authority, I'm technically not authorized based on board policy to purchase anything that I'm going to seek reimbursement for. So we could eliminate the dollar amount and end it at, and maybe reimburse for reasonable cost, period, and take everything else out, and then allow that principals make their site-based decision-making as well as central areas. So if the dollar amount is causing some confusion there.
Board members, do any of you have concern about removing it altogether? Ms. Mahaffey?
My only question is that going to, like, when we had the discussion about teacher gifts, is that going to cause phone calls to the office to ask what a reasonable amount is? Or?
Our current procedures state that an employee will receive reimbursement with original receipts approved by the budget manager. That is our current procedure.
Then no.
Just one comment on that.
Yeah.
I think that the difference in the policy as currently written is that the 200, if the item to be purchased is 250 or more, then there's an expectation the teacher gets prior approval instead of purchasing, asking for reimbursement, risking being told yes or no. And so there may be some value in just saying, you're not operating within policy if you go buy something for $1,000 with the expectation you'll be reimbursed without the prior approval.
Okay.
In either case, it does require the budget manager's approval. The answer could be no to the smaller purchase, but I think that's the purpose of why it's bifurcated.
Yep. All right. Does anybody have any questions about any other section or any other comments about this one, which is 7650? Yeah, Dr. Ng.
I like that point. Is that I think having that prior approval, it helps with the budgeting process for the budget manager. I'm just afraid that there will be I'm not able to account for everything that comes in, and then finding out after the fact that you're overextended, So.
Yeah, and my original concern was whether or not this was, if we had something separate for classroom teachers. You know what I mean? Because this, to me, when I read it originally, was really more for district level, central services level staff. But I think the prior, it addresses, what our concerns are. Is there a motion to move this to first reading?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? All right.
And just for my clarification, any edits? No edits, no revisions to what you see.
Correct.
I heard no firm recommendations for any revisions to this.
Right.
That's what you understand? For sure.
Ms. Caulfield?
I'm just going to, if you wanted to in G add any employees, that might make it clear that it's teachers or anybody else, just to add the word any. Any employees purchasing merchandise instead of just employees. That might make sure that it's clear to all parties.
In the section above, it says employees in F. I think that's meant to, I think all these references to employees are meant to refer to all employees, but certainly you could change them. I might change them all to all, if you're going to do that, just so no one thinks there's a difference there, but I think employees implies all employees.
I understand where you're coming from, Ms. Caulfield, but I think, especially just thinking of other policies, if it's more consistent that we usually just say employees, period, I think I agree, it's implied.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just suggesting.
Ms. Posey and I are conferring, and I wondered, and she has just confirmed that she is going to make a recommendation, or is going to make a revision regarding of the supervisor and a budget manager, that can be one person who is a principal or assistant principal or something like that. So you'll let me know what revision you recommend. So we will include a revision there.
Okay.
Based on the discussion that we had.
Okay, so make sure that this one, I guess, will come back to an action item so that we can hear that revision instead of onto consent.
If I may, just one other quick suggestion. On the very end of section C, there's a new sentence that says that this form requires the finance officer approval or their designee, assistant finance officer, or chief business officer. I think it might be clearer to move approval of right after require. So it would say this form requires approval of the finance officer, their designee, or the chief business officer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's substantively the same, but I think it's a little clearer structure.
A parliamentary question, do we need to recast our vote, or are we okay to,
Was there a vote?
There
We
was.
did move it.
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, you
voted-
want to take additional action, you just need a simple majority to adjust what you've done.
Yeah, just moving it to first
So just
reading.
another vote to bring it to first read with the amendments
Yeah.
noted, one of which will be forthcoming. You don't
Okay.
have yet, so that would have to be presented to the board.
So if we're expecting amendments anyway, we don't, to Mr. Hershey's point, we don't necessarily have to amend it now.
That's true.
We just expect it to be.
With
included in amendments.
additional,
With the
with the
first
changes.
reading,
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, all right. Thank you. On my count, that gets us to 7710, membership in professional organizations.
Yes. And this policy is not a current WAKE policy, it's just being migrated from the School Board Association. Just a brief policy that establishes the right for employees to join professional organizations, and then provides a little guidance on not completing those tasks while you're working as a WAKE employee. We just made a few minor revisions for consistency of language to match other policies, but we actually would like to propose an additional sentence to be added after the first sentence of the first paragraph, and that is, we would like to add, any costs associated with membership in a professional organization will be the responsibility of the employee.
Okay.
So that it's very clear that the school system's not paying the dues or any other costs associated.
And you said that'll go immediately. Every employee will have the right to freely join and support any professional organization And then
Then any costs associated with membership in a professional organization will be the responsibility of the employee.
Okay. Yep, Chair Haggerty.
We do. I think I had mentioned also that maybe...
Unless otherwise
authorized by the superintendent or designee.
Okay.
And that's because there are some contractual agreements out there that provide for that.
No,
you're fine, you're fine.
I was going to say,
AJ
superintendent
looked at me and we both were like...
in violation of that policy, sir.
Don't need to be in violation.
Yep, Chair Haggerty.
So everything seems real simple, but it looks like the policy was originally directed just at school personnel. By changing it to school system personnel and saying that you cannot participate while school is in session or while they're expected to be performing job-related duties, do you set up a situation where you could have school system personnel who are not employed in the school, whose job is not in any way tied to daily school functions, who have completed their job-related duties, but then would be prohibited from participation because it happens to be during school hours?
Seems like it would be clear when it says while they're expected to be performing job-related duties.
But that's not what it says. It has two conditions. One, while school is in session, that's one condition, or while they're expected to be performing job-related duties. So logically, you can have a scenario where the second condition, while expected to perform job-related duties, that's not met, they're free, right? They're not on their district duties, but it is during membership activity, it is during school hours when school is in session, even if that is unrelated to their job. And so if either one of these conditions is met, they should not participate in membership activities. And I'm wondering if one of those conditions isn't necessary depending on what their job duties is.
So the or instead of and being used there, either or?
But that's not what that's not what that says logically.
Does the unless specifically authorized by principal or supervisor help there?
I mean, it does provide an exception, but it sets the expectation that if you work if you work in central office, you can't do anything during school hours, even if maybe you're only working part-time.
Ms. Mahaffey?
And in that vein, I think of like some of our teachers that are maybe the president of like a North Carolina Arts Association, and you know, they have some downtime at school and are able to do some work on that. I mean, that's something that supports their work in the district. I don't know, it just seems like a lot, and then adding the unless specifically authorized just seems like there's a lack of trust and understanding. And I think in this era, if we're, you know, looking at school employees, and it just seems like some additional micromanaging that isn't necessary.
One option would be to remove while school is in session.
That was my suggestion.
Just because on the theory that, you know, that's a broad standard that applies to all your employees, whether it's a central office staff member who's got scheduled meetings or a teacher who's got classwork, classes to teach.
What we want is we don't want someone participating when they're expected to be performing their job-related duties, right? And it could be that, you know, something is related to their job, right?
Right.
And so then that would be excused under this. So I think just striking, like Neil said, the while school is in session for students, or, and so just reads, shall not participate in membership activities while or when they are, either while or when they're expected to be performing job-related duties. You know, the rest of the language is fine.
Mr. Ramey, can you tell me where we've landed? We're just...
I think, yes, what I have I may need some help from staff on the first edit. What I had was, unless otherwise approved by the superintendent or designee, this is a new sentence at the first paragraph, end of the first paragraph. Unless otherwise approved by the superintendent or designee, any costs associated with membership in a professional organization will be the responsibility of the employee. And I would suggest just adding or association, organization or association to track the language before that. So again, to read it one more time, unless otherwise approved by the superintendent or designee, any costs associated with membership in a professional organization or association will be the responsibility of the employee. The second change would be to strike while school is in session for students or from the last sentence.
Why do we need the cost piece in there? I mean,
We do get a lot of attempts to pay for personal memberships. And so it is something that is currently written in our procedural finance manual that we do not pay for that. We do have some exceptions, and so that's where the superintendent or their designee, so we look at the cost factor. It costs $1,000 for a registration as a non-member, but it's $600 as a member, and the membership's $100. So it's $700 to be a member and attend versus $1,000. So those are some of the conditions around it. And then additionally, we do have employment contracts that have conditions of allowable memberships.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, can I get a motion to move 7710 to first reading?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now we are going to 1710, 4021, 7230 RMP. This is related to Title IX. No action is required because it's RMP, and let staff.
yes, so as you know, in January, a federal court vacated the 2024 regulations. So we've just gone back to the 2020, which is what you have here, with just a few minor changes. So we did change on page 2, the contact information if the allegation is against a student. And then we changed on pages 13 and 14. We just added some clarifying language about the types of appeal and the process for appeal. But for the most part, it's the same as what we had in 2020.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? All right, and again, since no action is required, thank you, staff. And Dr. Crane, does that get us to our student use of personal wireless communication devices?
It does.
Discussion?
It does.
I feel like that should be
Some music. Right.
bad fair.
Yeah.
They seem solid for some reason.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. The last one?
Ladies and gentlemen, people, our goal is to get this ready for our work session next week.
Down and go over all of the information that was shared at the last board meeting to make sure that we have all the information and everything is exact with regards to what we need to include in the policy as we prepare the policy to come back for work session. During work session, when we do bring the policy back, we're going to provide an opportunity to really dive into the weeds or go as far or as less as whatever you guys need or whatever you deem necessary at the conclusion of today. But at this time, Dr. Crane is going to walk us through all of the information that was provided, capture any edits, and be able to share the information as it is so that we are prepared to move forward. Dr. Crane?
Sure. I want to start with, you guys asked me a question, Mr. Swanson asked me a question on Tuesday night that I did not have an answer for, and I have an answer for today. The question was about how are teachers informed about any accommodations students might have. We list in the policy medical care plans, IEPs, and 504 plans. IEP plans are made available to staff through ECATS, and teachers receive those. Medical health care plans are made available also through ECATS, and school nurses let teachers know as well. And 504 plans are communicated to staff through a 504 contact at the school who talks with any applicable teachers who are responsible for implementing those accommodations. Those are the ways that those plans get to teachers.
And I just wanted to add as well, as a result of the conversation, a teacher survey went out to every teacher this morning to really capture some of the questions that were presented by Board Member Mahaffey and others. And the other thing that I would like to share with the committee as well is that we sent out a communication to all principals, so all principals can share their current policies that they have in place in order that are really focused on cell phone and what it looks like in the schools, because we do understand some schools are already doing it and they're doing it very successful. And so once we capture all of that information, we'll be sharing it with the board and committee as well.
So to respond to the questions and points that you made on last Tuesday night, the draft of the policy that we uploaded for you today includes any changes that you recommended on Tuesday night in yellow, any additional changes, right? So you'll see on page 1, instead of parties, it says entities. On page 2, we include adding minimum in a section on elementary, middle schools, and high schools. And then on page 4, we have struck the word comply with and added the word follow. Also, in response to your concerns, we rolled back any of the revisions that we had made for that version. So you will see at the bottom of the last paragraph in the first section, we no longer use in airplane mode. We kept the original language as you requested that we do. So it includes the texting, internet must be disabled, etc. Also, a concern was we combined all schools and then broke out high schools. So we listed them again in the elementary and middle schools and then high schools separately. So we took care of that. And I think that's it as far as what we incorporated. I did highlight the word "or pocket" because it was clear that I had an understanding of what that meant, as in on a student's person. Maybe that's because I live with 3 young adults in my own home, and if you say put it in a pocket, they're putting it in a hoodie pocket, a pants pocket, a shirt pocket, something like that. They're going to keep it on their person versus a classroom wall pocket. And it was clear to me on Tuesday night that there was a very different understanding from the board about a wall pocket or a classroom pocket. So I did highlight that for clarification. And that is what is included in the draft that we uploaded today.
Thank you. Board members, you should have received in your email, what day was that, Ms. Mahaffey? Friday?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. From Ms. Mahaffey and Mr. Swanson spent some time with this and brought some suggestions, and if that's a mischaracterization, please let me know.
That's correct.
And I'll let ask the two of you to please sort of review what you'd like us to discuss.
Yeah, so we looked at the policy, and I think that both of us had spoken with some teachers in our circle just to get some understanding on how they utilize the policy as well. And it was clear that simplification was a little more of what they were looking for. And so Dr. Robinson very kindly printed out the suggested edits version. If you want to follow along with the clean version, that's in your
Mr.
email.
Rainey does not have a copy.
Oh,
We have an extra one right here.
okay.
Thanks.
Well, good news, Sam doesn't like paper.
No, I have it.
Oh, okay. We suggested striking that first paragraph because our goal, we felt like it was kind of apologetic to taking away the cell phones, and really felt that the second paragraph was a much stronger first paragraph because it showed kind of more our values of what we were looking for. We added in the now third paragraph, and I tried my best to format this as if I was, in Dr. Crane's head, but if I didn't get it perfect, please forgive me. Including but not limited to, because we know technology evolves. We added smart glasses, and well, I'm not sure if the Meta glasses have taken off yet, just kind of anticipating what's on the horizon. And then felt that what a smartphone can do, I think we all kind of knew, so decided to get rid of the examples rather than try to list everything that's possible. And then just a suggestion for later in the next sentence of inserting the policy in hyperlink for when we do have a district managed device policy. We added a new section A on communication expectations. That was something that was highlighted in the Governor's Advisory Council piece that Mr. Swanson shared with us last week. I think it was Friday, about communications and setting expectations with parents. So wanting to make sure that it's here, and letting families and staff know that, our expectation is if you reach out to us, we will be able to get a hold of your student, whether that's through talking points, the front office, or another means of communication. And as a parent, I know we have several, and as a parent, I know sometimes it's just easier to send that text, or it feels easier to send that text. And then Section B would become authorized use. There were no changes there. We couldn't remember why the at a minimum was added on Tuesday, so we struck it out, but if somebody wants to clarify that. And then we got rid of the bag or pocket based on the misinterpretation of Dr. Crane's
That was,
of a personal pocket versus a class pocket.
Mr. Hershey brought up the point on
Yeah.
Tuesday night, the at a minimum, because he wanted to, there was a concern about consistency across the district and setting a base level of expectation that schools at a minimum keep them silenced, require the students keep them silenced to put away between morning and afternoon bells. But that was the
Yeah, go
minimum.
ahead.
What they had brought Tuesday, they had said schools could decide, and it was like bell to bell or drop off to drop off, and we wanted to have the minimum be bell to bell if they wanted to extend. It was also trying to provide that flexibility to principals to extend it to the moment you step on, like drop off to pick up, which
Okay.
not a hill to die on, but that was in response to the flexibility
I
that they
couldn't
were trying to
remember.
provide.
And some elementary schools already have that standard in place,
Yeah,
Mr.
they do.
Hershey. Right.
So is the idea that with the at a minimum language that schools could have more restrictive policies than what the board is requiring? Or I would interpret this to mean this is the rule. Students must keep phone silence and put away between morning and afternoon bells.
So
Okay, we got a lot.
Yeah.
I have a procedural question.
Sure.
So there's a lot here, and I would like Ms. Mahaffey and Vice Chair Swanson to be able to go through, and if they want to present it all at one time, present it all at one time, or if we are going by section, there's like earlier sections that like I had questions about, and I don't want to like jump around and go in order, so I just want to check with everybody. Would you rather go through all of it first, or go section by section?
Why don't we pause now, because to allow Ms. Mahaffey and Mr. Swanson to, it's 3 more pages. So why don't we pause here and address anything here and prior to. Mr. Amy, what I feel that the whole board is looking for, Mr. Cooker, confirming. Mr. Ramey, to answer your question, I really think our board, and board members correct me if I'm wrong, we really want consistency across all of our schools. You know, maybe not 100% every detail, but the big overarching goal is to have some consistency across our campuses, all of our campuses. Is that? Okay. So I don't know that helps with what you're asking with the specific at minimum.
I just want making sure everyone's has a common understanding of what adding at a minimum would mean. To me, it doesn't really do much. It's not a direct authorization to schools that they can have more restrictive policies than what the board has said. If a principal called me about that language, I would say, you got to follow board policy, and the rule is no phones between morning and afternoon bells. And if the principal said, well, I want to ban them starting at 5 a.m., I'd say, I don't think you can. I'm not sure. Not unless the language more clearly stated that, like I said, it authorized schools to adopt other restrictions that were, to have more restrictive policies, school-based policies, but there's no language like that. There was some language like that, but that's gone now. So I guess I'm saying at a minimum, just adding those 3 words to me is not enough to directly authorize schools to deviate from the parameters of the policy. Was that the intent of did the board I wasn't at the board meeting when this was discussed, was there direction from the board on what to do? Because we can get the language
We had talked about,
meet your expectations.
before the change, we seem to have come to a consensus around bell to bell.
Yeah.
At prior meetings, and then there was an attempt to build in flexibility, so I think that was...
Oh, I see. So
flexibility to go beyond what we said, like, it's about, I personally love for elementary, like, what Mr. Cook said, which is the moment you step off on campus to when you leave, because that's elementary school. But
if the board's consensus is to say bell to bell is the minimum, but schools can set more restrictive approaches, they can extend that a little bit before the morning bell or after the afternoon bell, I would add a new sentence to be clear that that's the fact. Because to me, just add a minimum, I didn't read it that way. I read it as, just saying that the policy, just prohibits phone use during those times.
Okay. Mr. Haggerty and Mr. Swanson, did y'all want to chime in on anything prior to?
Sorry, I was just trying to follow some things. There's some things that I think do reflect, some proposed changes that do reflect the board conversation. There's some other things that are a little bit new.
Yeah.
And Mr. Swanson was explaining that some of those were brought in, like I have the governor's recommended policy and everything. So I don't know where we are with all of them, but just starting at the beginning, if you want to strike that first paragraph, I can go along with that, but then I would just amend that second paragraph just so that it begins, the Wake County Board of Education, strike promotes, recognizes digital literacy, and just read the rest as follows, just so that way.
Yeah, I think that's
It's just
more consistent.
format-wise, that's all. And to Mr. Ramey's point, I thought that's what the at a minimum was, that it would grant a principal the authority to have the ban beyond bell to bell anytime on school policy. And to me, that was more my understanding, that we were looking at the flexibility that a principal could do that, especially at the elementary or middle level. I actually did not think we had agreed on bell to bell at the high school level.
No.
Yeah.
I'm talking, this was just middle,
Okay.
elementary and middle.
Because reading ahead,
I'm just there.
it looks like we do use the same language, morning and afternoon bells for high school, too.
I think what happens, there was some earlier draft that said that schools could define what's the instructional day for purposes of the board. The board was saying no use during the instructional day, and the staff had suggested language that each school could determine that. And my understanding is the board didn't like that. You want more consistency and everything. So what we're left with, so that language about authorizing schools to have their own rules was removed. And all I'm saying is if you want to get back to something like that with parameters, I would add another sentence that would say, schools may, so you could say students must keep phone silence between morning and afternoon bells. Schools may also develop additional restrictions, and lay any parameters or whatever there, because just saying at a minimum, to me, does not clearly tell a school that they can do
Okay.
more than what the policy does.
Mr. Swanson?
Which is why I was suggesting, Ms. Mahaffey, that we strike it, because it didn't really make sense when we were going through different scenarios. If, West Cary Middle School has a policy that's different from East Cary Middle School, we didn't want families to figure, or to feel that there was some inconsistencies with this. And so I just use those two schools as an example. I don't know what those two schools have. I didn't want to, pick on those schools, but those are the first two that came to mind. But I do think the bell-to-bell is clear and concise, and it could be standard across the board.
Does anybody object to the second sentence after that Mr. Ramey is suggesting that says that schools could go beyond that?
I do.
Okay.
I think that's what it says.
Okay.
And I'm not suggesting, I'm just offering your options, whatever you all decide to do.
Well, I think
We'll draft the language.
there could be different interpretations of bell to bell, because there is the opening bell when school opens for students to come inside the building. So if a school starts at 8:30, the bell to come in comes at 8. So, that could be a flexible interpretation.
I would support opening bell.
Yeah.
Or would it be with the start of the first period bell or first classroom bell? Because again, if students are in a common area and school hasn't started.
Well, sorry, I'm interrupting. Go ahead.
That was just the piece I was going to say. I think that bell to bell needs to be a little bit more detailed. Is it opening class bell or end of school day? But if someone says bell to bell, I know at a high school, there's multiple bells. So I think we should just nail that a little bit more.
Okay. I think that's where the distinction could be different. I think for your elementary and high school, it could be that first bell, so that when they have that 30 minutes that they're inside the classroom or getting lunch or breakfast, maybe that's when I'll defer to our elementary expert.
Yeah, I was going to say, would it be feasible to say at the beginning of the instructional bell, when instruction is supposed to start? That would define the start of it. Mr. Hershey?
I would rather it be, so if you have when kids are eating, they can do it, but, so if you have a 9:15 start time, at 8:45, that first bell, and kids are getting off, that's when I would vote, that's what I would vote for versus, because then you have 30 minutes of them potentially being in school and messing around on their phones, and do we want that as, to me, that's a distraction that we're trying to get rid of, like, to create that, hey, you're in school, and I'm talking elementary and middle school. That's how I would vote on this.
Ms. Caulfield?
If we just put in, like Ms. Gordon said, instructional, and that word in there, doesn't that kind of close that gap?
No.
So-
Because if you're saying and put away between instructional morning and afternoon bells, any time that you're in instruction is when you have to put it away.
So I think what it is we just have a disagreement. And it's not that one set of words is going to encompass what everybody wants. I just think some people are saying, well, it's okay to have phone use at school before instructional time, and another view that, well, once the bell rings and you're in school, whether it's instructional or not, then you shouldn't use your phone. And I think it's just a matter of, we'll have to vote one way or the other. I don't think we're going to come up with one set of language that does both.
I'm starting to doubt that myself. But I want to remind us all, we can bring this policy back, for revisions as time goes on, certainly based on what happens at the state level. But one comment I want to make, I understand the confusion about the bag, pocket, et cetera, but I think that needs to be in there, because when I see bag, I think of like a purse, a tote, because not everybody uses a quote-unquote backpack. But then I also worry about how many examples of this are we going to have. So I respect that. And a pocket, for me, on one's person or something like that, because I think my understanding was that we were talking about an on-person pocket where the student could feel the, vibration, the vibrate mode. If it rings or texts or what have you, that would be, happening, could be very distracting. Yes, Mr.
I view that as a distraction if it's on your pocket. So, I mean, the point of the policy is to limit any type of distractions while academic learning is taking place. A backpack or something that is not on a student makes better sense.
Yeah.
Because then you are having teachers constantly say, hey, Ms. Mahaffey, get your hands out of your pockets. It could just create a situation that we don't need to have that take away.
And I apologize, I was not clear. I agree with you. I think it's too distracting to have it on their person.
So are we going with striking out the pocket?
Yes.
Keeping the bag.
Yeah, because I think of, again, purse, tote. It's not necessarily a backpack. And I apologize, I didn't articulate that very well. Okay, Ms. Mahaffey, should I turn it back to you to go? I see the strikeout of section B.
Yeah, so in section A, since...
Or number 1B.
In 1A, we got rid of developed by school nursing staff because we did not designate who develops an IEP or a 504. Section B, that strikeout was, again, thinking of our elementary and middle school folks and just keeping it away during instructional time. Whereas that might be more appropriate for our high school students. And knowing that the interpretations that are coming down from the House and Senate both say kind of a bell-to-bell ban. And then the new section B, just adding a may and changing wireless communication to personal. And that's it for the elementary, middle school section.
Yep. Mr. Perry.
So just making sure I've got everything, and I missed one thing before. The communications expectation,
Yeah.
I think I understand it. I'm not as big a fan of it, just because, like, why wouldn't we have these expectations of, like, any other behavioral policy that we want to discuss with children, whether it's attendance or, code of conduct, aspirational behavior?
Yeah.
I'm not going to die on the hill. I just...
No, I totally agree with you, and I think, since this is such a new policy and we're going to have principals setting the expectation, I imagine we will have a district communication plan from Ms. Luton's office to let folks know, both staff and families, what the expectation is. And then seeing what the governor's office recommended, having that in there to help retrain families on how to contact was important, and really felt that adding it in the policy was important to show. And that could be something that maybe we phase out, this time next year.
And it would also say that it's a partnership with families, because again, we are trying to change human behavior. And having this, I think we had put it originally at the back end, but putting it in the front, because again, the point you raised is what Ms. Mahaffey raised when we were talking through it, and so we felt in order to take it off the front office staff, if it's a school counselor, administrator, classroom teacher, someone in the building that parents can build a partnership with, can help ease those concerns.
That's a good explanation. Thank you.
We've probably spent more time than necessary on this tiny paragraph to make sure that it was that partnership language and not telling parents what they should and shouldn't do, because we really felt like it was a team effort.
Then if I can, actually just to follow up, so we're striking pocket, are we keeping bag or?
I think so.
Okay. And then I got all the other ones, I thought it was, so I wanted to make sure, we say may authorize the use of a personal device. Is personal device going to be just the language we use for any kind of mobile phone? Consistent?
I mean, when you say a wireless device,
I know.
it could mean many things.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
personal device, which is something that It was just trying to be concise,
Yeah.
that we could name.
Just trying to lay down.
I was just thinking, for consistency, if that's what you want to use, maybe when we say up here, such devices, or see, up here we say wireless communication devices, and so that's kind of like the term we define. But, so maybe up here, wireless communication devices, hereafter personal devices, and then you can just use that encompassing later. It's just for consistency, that's all. Okay, and I was fine with all the rest, thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, just following that consistency piece, under high school section, so the bag strikeout needs to be corrected in that top.
Yep, we're not there yet.
I thought we were going to continue. I think we just were saying up to this point, right?
She's saying Lindsay. Ones that have not gotten.
Oh, to the high school part?
But we're with you.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Dr. Ames?
All right, high school, I mean, it doesn't look like there was anything until high school section C, except for the bag pocket thing.
Dr. Ing had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Ring, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on that too, but before that, in the paragraph for the purpose of this policy, there's, I just don't, the language of it, I thought may be a little confusing. Device accessories may include items, but are not limited to such as, it doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, we didn't go through that piece I know that was a really robust discussion at a prior, I think last month's policy meeting, we really dug into that paragraph. So we felt like if there was a lot of consensus around the majority of what the definitions were, we didn't want to try to reinterpret.
But I think the such to piece is just a typo.
I think it's just, I think it may include, but are not limited to, items such as, yeah. That's the,
Oh, so just move items
yep. the
over
other
to
side of
after the but are not limited
included
to.
phrase.
Okay, that sounds good.
Dr. Ring, did you have something else?
And I agree with that new letter A. I like the fact that we're including it in there, and then potentially down the road we can, I agree with phase it out, since at that point hopefully we will have other communications, agendas that we can.
And I imagine those expectations will be in the handbook, but I imagine a lot of families are like me, where sometimes you just sign that page because you're busy, and it might take a couple cycles to go through it, because there's a lot of paperwork to sign at the beginning of the year. I'll admit it.
Okay, do you want to continue with your high school
Yeah.
piece?
So high school, there were, again, those changes that Ms. Edmonds denoted that are similar to what we saw in the elementary piece. We added back in B, letting students use their phones. I know sometimes they're recording videos or they're having to do things, and the Chromebook is just really clunky for those sorts of things. Section 3 with buses, we added a little more of that expectation piece, again, to Chair Haggerty's point, something that you would expect may go away, but just reiterating that devices should be quiet and not distracting to the driver, and that if the driver provides an instruction, that it should be followed. And then for B, consequences of unauthorized use, we added that first sentence. And then you'll see a lot of strikeouts when it comes to additional policies. And I just want to show that the pieces talking about the Code of Student Conduct, along with the next section of search, and I'm going to come back to the other piece, search of personal wireless communication devices. We just added a new district, or a new section D, other applicable policies, because I think getting into the Code of Conduct pieces just seemed really heavy at first, and we wanted to set the expectation of this policy. And so we just put those in other roles. So I know that anyway.
So The strikeouts in B for consequences of unauthorized use
Yes.
are actually now under the new D, other applicable policies, because I'm trying to look word for word, but I just want to be clear.
Unless my copy and paste went wrong, that should be word for word, plus or minus one letter. And then, because of that, we struck out the however. So essentially, most things there are the same, struck out the however, and added a
Expectation about if a phone is confiscated, what is the expectation? So parents know who to contact or is aware. So again, since it's a partnership and this is a new policy, we want to be as transparent and open with parents as possible.
Right, so if someone takes, my phone for the day, my parent or guardian would be notified that I didn't have it the entire day versus being returned at the end of class. And I think that covers it all. So I will leave it there, since I already talked about the other applicable policies piece. We did strike out a couple, like the for example piece, because there's so many different examples. Like if a threat was communicated, we just felt like that was covered in the student code of conduct. And then with the searches, we felt like if we're linking to that, the information about student searches could be found there rather than try to hash out the entire policy in that section. And that's all.
Okay, thank you. Chair Haggerty?
Thank you. So then this is for where we stop through the rest of the policy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So a couple things. I'll start with, I'll try to go simple first and then go into bigger ones.
As you wish.
With B, the new high school, so this is section B2, small letter B. This is one where we've talked about what the state might or might not do.
Right.
And so as to not have to go back in and change the policy, how would you feel about the school administration has, comma, as permitted by law, elected to allow, and that way, if we are allowed to, we can keep B, but then if they say that we can't do it for that reason, we don't have to go back and amend the policy.
So I thought about that.
Yeah.
And we have, in the past, just had to amend the policy, and I think this would be a quick technical correction to strike that out if need be. And
Okay.
so we talked about that quite a bit, and while we don't always write policies, although we can assume that this is coming, rather than, the law would be the applicable thing, and we would have to change the policy anyway, so that's why it wasn't added. But if that makes you more comfortable, then...
It's one of the things sometimes we run into in policy where people say we're doing something as permitted by law or not permitted by law. Sometimes it's very clear, and then other times it's like subject to someone's interpretation of the law. And so, like if we say it's permitted by law, but someone else says it's not, we can still defend the policy saying, well, based on our legal interpretation it is,
Yeah, let's
even
throw
if
it
it's
in
not
there.
always as clear. Okay, and again, it's not a big
Yeah.
thing like,
No, again,
Okay.
we went back and forth on it.
yeah. I really do like the language that you added under buses. I thought that was good. I appreciate your explanation for why you changed the consequences for unauthorized use and the search of personal devices. I think it kind of runs counter to the idea that you want things spelled out and as clear as possible for parents, because I think if they're looking for consequences and if they're looking for the ability to search, having them pulled out is a little more clear than putting them under just other applicable policies. Even if you just wanted to call other applicable policies, search and consequence, but that's just a personal opinion. That's not any kind of deal breaker. The big question I have, though, is on high schools, did we agree as a board, or was there division about whether we wanted cell phone use restricted bell to bell or just in instructional time? Because that's what my memory is running a little bit counter.
So I think I was the vocal person against having high school look very similar to elementary and middle school, and that there should be some differentiation amongst the two in the policies. And so for high school, you will see it is not as lean unless the state mandates. Because in my experience as a high school teacher, you would have students using for various projects. You have, so it's there, but it also talks about with staff or teacher discretion. So it's not a free-for-all. It's if that teacher allows you to use it, then sure. But if not, the policy then...
And so that's, and what we saw there in B was, I think, we did want to consider and have an exception for instructional use. But then again, I just didn't know how far we wanted to go. If students are at lunch, could they just listen to music, play a game, or do things as well?
Yes, indeed.
Which, down there.
Under high school, yeah. And that was something that was in Dr. Crane's edit based on our
Okay.
conversation. Yeah.
I missed that as the original policy.
We did add smart or star lunch. We were trying to find a way to talk about, like, because if you're in my classroom during star lunch just hanging out, we didn't want to, but I know there's like 5 different ways that they say it, so I didn't know what the piece of that is.
Okay. I appreciate you pointing that out.
Yeah.
The last things have to do with like confiscation and notice. I do think if we say, it does say parents and guardians should be notified, which I think is good language. If we said like must be notified, then there's a question of you send an email, but can you guarantee confirmation? Does the parent say, well, I never got your voicemail, I never got your
You're
text?
getting why we put should in there.
Okay. I was asking because I didn't know.
It was an interesting discussion about that too, because I raised the same.
And the distinction here between end of class period and end of the day is only based on repeated use, right? Because I know some of the teachers were just saying just end of the day, but this one sort of gives like a break. Okay. And then just the last piece is, I know you all didn't try to tackle this, but I still think it is a big policy issue, the whole issue of confiscation. And, again, confiscated devices must be stored securely until the device is returned to the student or parent or guardian. I just am worried about us as a district and our teachers and what their role in confiscation might be. I know you didn't address it.
No, and maybe
it might be
just
too
get
big.
rid of the word securely,
Yeah.
or as secure as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking about the filing cabinets I had in my classroom. They didn't always have a key. My desk never did have a key, so you can't lock it into it. So I think there has to be something that we could...
To the extent practical, to channel Mr. Blumberg and one of his favorite policy phrases.
Yeah, I just don't have a solution.
Yeah, no, I know.
I
know.
Yeah, thank you.
This side of the table, Mr.
Well,
Amy.
just briefly, the reason for the word securely there is actually to make sure that staff understand they assume responsibility for the device once they confiscate it, so you can't leave it lying on a table unattended for the rest of the school day and then have it go missing. So the idea of securely is to decrease potential liability for the school system by imposing a clear obligation on staff. You need to keep it safe. Whether that's and that's not more specific than that, we could say a locked drawer.
Well, I think
something like
those
that.
desks aren't always
For
locked.
the reasons
Or
that,
unlocked.
like Ms. Mahaffey and Vice Chair Swanson just talked about, but understanding your perspective on securely, that's why I still question confiscation, except in a case maybe where it's going to for the whole day, going to a central office location. And why, I don't have an answer for it, but if there was a way, like we've talked about the sleeves, we've talked about the pouches, or some way that it could be, visibly stored within the student's site, versus the secure location. Again, it doesn't leave the student's possession, but it's clearly not in use. I just really think that could be a better alternative than we have a confiscation. And let's say, I'll pick on myself, I'm using the phone inappropriately in my English teacher's class. Mr. Swanson, as the teacher, takes it. I get it back. Hey, what'd you do to my protector? Why'd you crack my screen? And now we've got a potential dispute, right? Anytime he asks for it, no, I don't want to give it to you. Are we escalating that thing? Or, hey, the teacher took my phone. My dad, God rest his soul, but he was here, would say, don't give him your phone. That phone cost a lot of money. You keep that phone. Again, I just think there's problems with confiscation that we're going to run into. And again, maybe we get this policy out now, and we come out and we revise it. But I think we seriously have to work on an alternative, except for maybe when it goes to the office for like repeated behavior.
Mr. Hershey?
Aren't we getting this feedback from, so we don't really have to make a decision on that now? That's for the work session, I guess.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that out there.
Ms. Caulfield, Dr. Ing?
I was just, I appreciate all the changes that you guys worked on and how you changed some of the words to be a little bit more specific. I do like the idea of having the actual section for consequences because it's spelling out, here's what our expectations are. If they're not followed, then this is what's going to happen. And I don't really want us to really water that down because it's just making it very clear to both parents, staff, and everybody else, which I think the teachers and principals would really appreciate, having that very specific language to say, this is the expectations. If it doesn't happen, this is what's going to happen. I think if we're worried about every single thing that could happen because they're not following the rules, it's completely going against why we're making it in the first place.
So I'm fine with putting it back in that section. What I would ask is that we put it at the end of that section. That's fine. So that it's in there. And then we can go back to having the, the search policy back as its own separate piece. So putting the section on the student code of conduct at the...
Yeah, I don't mind having it at the end. It's just that it's being said because, it's following the pattern. Like, this is what the expectations are, this is why, and then if you don't,
I agree.
that is the end result.
Yeah.
So with our policy, it's going to read the same.
Yeah.
So, I just don't want to remove it.
I agree with you. So my question then is, when you say put it at the end, are you saying that consequences for unauthorized use be like the last item in these pages?
No. So within that section, so if you're looking at consequences for unauthorized use, you see the first sentence.
In the staff, what was provided by staff?
No, if you look at this one that I'm looking at with that's in front of you, the paper copy. So it would have the consequences for unauthorized use, that blue sentence, and then it would go into the second page. And then here, down at the bottom, after it says confiscated devices must be stored securely until the device is returned to the student or parent/guardian, then it would be the piece about the student code of conduct at the end of that section.
And we would strike other applicable policies?
Yes, and then restore the piece on the policy, the section on student searches.
And if I could just ask, the second part of that paragraph where it kind of spells it out, what was the thought on that, like, to strike it out?
So my thought was, that's one example, and I'm not, my thought on striking that out is we have other examples of how that could be misused other than this, and so I didn't want it to be like that's the only way that it could be misused within the student code of conduct. But again, if folks feel like it's more important to have that one example in there, I'm fine with it.
But traditionally, we don't have examples in other policies that I'm
Correct.
familiar with.
Correct. We just cite the other policy and then make sure that it's hyperlinked so that folks can go to that policy and see the different reasons. And we may have examples within the student code of conduct.
All right, we are very close to time, so I want to check with Dr. Ing and Ms. Gordon to see if you have anything.
Yes, and so in that, under high school, letter C, just want to make sure that we're consistent with the wording of the wireless communication device, striking that out and replace it with personal. And then just a kind of a question/comment. I just want to make sure that in the implementation of this policy for persons with IEPs and 504 plan or health plan, that we are able to implement it in a way with good communication to substitutes and so forth, so that they're not blindsided with something that is an exception to the rule, and then getting, and then creating a potential conflict when that teacher may not know that the person has that specific, stipulation in the IEP.
No, I'm right there with you.
I mean, as a teacher that taught SPED and was often out and had to write sub-plans, I would also detail, various case scenarios, who to contact if there was an issue with that, particularly as my next door neighbor would pop in if there was an issue. So I think teachers will be able to articulate that in their sub-plans with great details and who to contact if there's an issue. But I understand the point you raised.
Ms. Gordon?
I just wanted to go back to the high school part. When we talked about potentially adding the instructional piece, are we talking about adding that to the high school part too? About the bell, the students must keep them silence and put away between morning and afternoon bells?
So that is in the opening paragraph, but there's also B and D that pull out exceptions for that piece, and that was the part that Mr. Swanson, given his experience in the high school, was wanting to make sure that there was time throughout the day for students to have their phones, and so teachers aren't having to constantly monitor high schoolers to put their phone away.
Okay.
We didn't change that first. We still have to, at the work session, talk about the first bell instruction.
I think so, yeah.
Make my case.
Well, staff, how are you feeling? We have put y'all through the ringer. This has been really difficult for us, and we've challenged you with a lot of things and a lot of changes. I really appreciate all your time and effort, especially today with a lot more revisions and edits. Do you feel confident about where we are for work session?
I think so. Yes.
We can, probably a couple of things to study a little bit, just to make sure. One thing I just want, as a reminder, I know you all know this, we got a bill pending, and it's probably going to pass, and so we need to make sure, check back on the language in the bill, make sure nothing's changed there. I think and there are a couple of issues I want to look at closely with these revisions, so I might email you if there are, issues there to think about in the board meeting, but do you feel like you've captured the consensus on the additional edits?
I feel like I owe Dr. Crane a candy bar.
Yes.
If we have other questions or suggestions, who should we include? Is it Neil, Drew, Julie, and Dr. Robinson?
Yeah, please.
I apologize that only Dr. Robinson got the title on that, but.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Because I know, they all need, more time to digest any questions or edits. And I really would, I feel like we're very, very close, and I feel, again, not to beat a dead horse, but we can revise this at any point in time, at any policy committee, even in a short time frame. If we have to bring this back in August or September, et cetera, we can do that. And we will do that if that's necessary. So I would ask that you be very thoughtful about offering more edits and changes. Please. Did you have one last?
I did, and it doesn't have to be addressed now because I know that we're short on time, but I just wanted us to be a little bit mindful about the parents should be notified piece. If we could find just better language that it almost suggests to do it, and I don't want it to be suggestive, because that's an important piece. If the parents aren't part of it and they're not informed, then they can't really stop and help or even understand that their child is just not behaving with the phone. So this is escalating before it becomes a problem. So I just worried that we're...
That's specifically in that confiscation piece at the end of the day?
That piece was actually in the B consequences piece, yes. I think it's highlighted gray.
Yeah, that was one that we added, and that
Yeah.
was, again, in that partnership piece, but also knowing that sometimes things happen and not everyone is able to notify in a timely manner every
Right.
time.
Which I
And so that
understand.
was the reason behind it. But the
Yeah.
expectation is that a parent would be notified if it's confiscated for the day.
Right. I just don't want the word "should" to be suggested that, yeah, it might be a good idea if you don't want to do that.
Well, I know my kid's going to tell me if their phone's taken away for the day.
So I'm going to ask Mr. Amy and staff to think about, I hear you, but I think I've got some concerns about how prescriptive directive we're going to be to staff. So, thank you all, and thank you, Dr. Robinson and Dr. Crane specifically. Again, this has been a challenging thing to do, but I know we're doing the right thing, and I'm glad we're doing it ahead of any legislation, and I appreciate everybody's work. And we will call this meeting adjourned at 3:01.